you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, we learned that sings that makes it official. Welcome to 16 years and over 2,300 episodes of the Chris Voss Show to date in 2025 January. Anyway, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may buy advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book's success.
Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, that was 21 to 24. And what they focused on was deployment trauma, and that's kind of the common understanding that deployment trauma can create mental health issues for veterans. But the work that we've done is around how the culture and the systems of any military, particularly I look at the Five Eyes nations, that's the UK, US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, to see how just the everyday kind of being part of a military can also have dramatic effects on people. And so that's the institutional abuse side of things. Yeah, we've done a historical piece here. So it goes back to 1969. Research goes back a bit further. And I guess the fundamental point we're making is that militaries are institutions of and for violence, for good reason. Yeah. But if you don't manage that potential for violence effectively, then it can be turned inside and back on its own people. And that's what we've been illuminating. And the book is the first historical record of that in Australia. And I'd say internationally, yeah.
Any sort of organization big enough is definitely a penchant to abuse and issues. What led you to the story? What drew you to this story and writing about it?
Yeah, I served myself I'm an Army veteran, and so I saw a little bit of it in the infantry and then as a military policeman. Mm-hmm. I left the service. I went to study. I did my PhD on other things completely. And then I started researching military justice reform in Australia, which was quite hot around the early 2000s. That became public, and people started approaching me with their stories, and I've been collecting those accounts for the last 20 years.
Oh, wow. And what are some of the abuses that you see institutionally going on? Are these abuses that aren't even really specific too much to the Australian military, but to other militaries around the world?
Yeah, I think, the unique element of any military is it has a very strong command and control character to it. Mm-hmm. It's highly regimented, and it has its own military justice system, its own health system, and people are locked into that, into the military. In the US, for example, have families growing up on bases. We have a little bit of that in Australia, but what I'm getting at is that military life can be really immersive. Mm-hmm. When you lock that in with an institution that's about bringing civilians, running them through 12 weeks to 12 months of really intense training, it totally changes who you are. Yeah. Your civilian life is broken down, and you develop a loyalty, almost a principal loyalty to the military as your family and your mates and camaraderie. The key bit, I guess, is that the military justice system gives commanders complete discretion for a disciplinary action. Mm-hmm. So that's both useful to maintain military justice, but it also is a point where it can be exploited and used inappropriately. And so the sorts of abuse that we see in the military are, some of them are kind of what you would see in any large institution, physical, sexual. Mm-hmm. But the key, the unique piece we see here is administrative violence. I don't know if you've heard of these terms, but like things like painting rocks and sweeping away the rain. That's when a commander will mercilessly ask you to do very trivial and meaningless things for extended periods of time. Or they may lose your leave paperwork, or they may not put you on deployment, or they may not put you on courses, or you may not get promotions. And so because of that intense discretion and authority that a commander has, as one of the principal forms of exploitation of subordinates in any military.
Oh, wow. Tell us about your journey through life. You grew up in the military, became a professor. Is this your first book you've written? And what others are you have or maybe you're working on? I said from 1987 to 1995, in the regular army till 92, reserves after that. As I said, I was in the infantry, served in New Guinea, and served around the northern parts of Australia, so mainly jungle warfare. I had an excellent time. It gave me a sense of security and stability after a bit of a rocky childhood. And I learned a lot from it. But, as you do in the military, you also have some traumatic experiences. Mm-hmm. So that led me to discharge involuntarily or leave involuntarily and pretty much reject, I guess, the military for about a decade, 10 years, while I was studying at uni and learning to be a bit more liberal than I was in the army. Mm-hmm. So one of my experiences was in the infantry is a hazing ritual. So I don't know if you've come across the term hazing. Yes. I think it is a US term. Yeah. Yes. You get this in these kind of institutions. They're like initiation sort of ritual or rites, and it's usually the in-group either trying to weed someone out that they don't think should be there, or, strangely enough, welcome people in that are considered to be part of the team. Yeah, it's abusing them in doing so. Right?
Yeah, I know it's odd, isn't it? But so I mean, you can be, people can love you and still do horrible things to you. And those sort of horrible things are like tying you up and basting you in all sorts of foul substances, taking all your clothes off and dropping you out in the bush and making you run back. This is the other thing, Chris, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of, on the one hand, there's this stuff is really serious and horrible, but there's also a great sense of humour in the army, and sometimes this stuff is funny, but then sometimes it'll just be pushed too far, and then it creates real issues for people. And I can't understate it. Through the interviews we've done, people have lifelong sort of struggles after some of these experiences. Yeah. So anyway, that's right. Yeah, or moral injury as well, institutional betrayal. Anyway, so I as I said before, when I finished my research studies at university, and I went on to become an academic, and then I've been military justice and cultural reform for the last 2 decades.
So has the Australian military looked into this sort of thing? Has this brought maybe the issue to a forefront for them? Yeah, look, I without blowing my horn, I mean, we lifted the lid on this. I lifted the lid on this. We've done the media and raised the awareness. Our research, or my research, has contributed deeply to the Royal Commission, as I said. But, and you may not be surprised, the Defence Forces aren't always that open to the sort of information or research that we're doing. Globally, so I said Five Eyes nations, but globally I think the US is probably leading the way in terms of reform around this sort of stuff. Although, having said that, I think your rates are still rising, so it's not straightforward. But in Australia, a bit ahead in the sand. Same in the UK, a bit ahead in the sand. Canada, far more open. And New Zealand more open too. But yeah, in my first 10 years, when I was really trying to raise the issue, I received blacklisting from Defence and some nasty letters, and then from the sector, some death threats and bad emails and things like that. But you see, when you critique, I'm not critiquing the military. I'm saying, how can we be a better military? Yeah. How can we do this better? But how can we be more healthier mentally for everybody?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's a whole thing around retention and recruitment and personnel workplace safety.
Yeah, especially nowadays, because I don't know what's going on in Australia, but here in America, a lot of these new kids in the generation, they don't want to join the military. They want to sit home and play video games if they want to get close to the war.
Same here, Chris. We're down by 5,000 in our forces. The British the same. Yeah. And retention is, people are leaving in droves. Retention is very poor, and young people don't want to join. Yeah.
And if they don't want to join, then you got no military. If you don't have a military, good luck in this world.
Particularly this time, Yeah. With things going on around the world.
Especially nowadays, there's a couple things going on. But it's really important. In the book, do you talk about things the military should do to resolve some of these issues, or do you just profile the abuses?
No, we put it in a policy. See, we look at it in terms of scandals and inquiries. So it's about organisational reform as well. So when these issues arise, how does the state, the military, and civil society respond? And it usually happens through the scandal, so initiation or sexual assault or a physical assault or even outside of abuse, things like procurement and fraud and stuff, then it hits the newspapers. The media are usually the ones that act like the fourth estate to raise the issue. So civil society get involved, and there's usually a government-led inquiry, and then from that, a bunch of recommendations. The Royal Commission just showed that we've had 57 inquiries since 1970, and about 10% of those recommendations have been met. Militaries are not great at dealing with cultural reform. Their focus is usually on administrative responses. But so just quickly, the sort of responses you want, the key one is independent scrutiny, which is a highly contentious issue for militaries. We've had various inquiries over time that have said we need to take the redress of grievances out of the chain of command. That was recommended back in 2005, and the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, and the Chief of the Defence Force at the time vetoed 44 senators' recommendation on that front. That recommendation has recently been made again by the Royal Commission. So that's the key one. I guess the other one is, and you've got this in the US, but sexual misconduct prevention officers. So if people are exposed to this sort of behaviour, they can go to a specialised office. That has had some challenges in Australia with issues of confidentiality. I wouldn't say it's been intensely successful. Then there are a bunch of other responses as well. I just don't want to keep on talking forever.
Sure. It definitely, I suppose in a military organization, a college, there's these things that go on, and I think they just get out of hand. Like, colleges had a thing there where they were having people dying there for a while here in America over hazing events, freshmen entering fraternities and things of that nature. And it really caused a lot of problems because people don't send their kids to college to get, tarred and feathers and killed, and they send them to go learn stuff. And you're like, oh, I thought they were at school learning stuff, and they're tied up with goats or something. I don't know. I was going to say, no, sorry, it's gone. That's okay. Maybe I'll come back. It's like I said, I'm citing some of the scenes from Old School, the movie, with the goats, but
Animal House, that sort of stuff.
Was it Animal House? Yeah, Animal House too. Yeah, they did hazing in there. Sounds like it's something that needs to be called out. People. It's hard enough joining the military and surviving that environment, especially when you enter the theater of war. I mean, you don't need any more brain damage than you're already dealing with, really, when it comes down to it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What do I know?
I was going to say before we joined, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go, serving the nation. Usually 17 or 18, maybe 20, 22. Very eager, and we expect. We expect that we may have to put ourselves in harm's way. That's the cost of war. We expect, that's a possibility. We don't expect what I call the cost of service. This sort of stuff, this sort of harassment or abuse or assault. Yeah.
Well, that's important and stuff. What haven't we covered that we should talk about in promoting your book or the services you offer? I think you have a website that you offer to help people with these sort of things.
We are solely a research entity. I established Open Door, improving the well-being of veterans, public safety personnel and their families in 2021. Going nearly about 4.5 years. We've led some significant national research projects. The way that it works, I guess, is that my aim was to try and build the research and then to work with others that can translate that research into suicide prevention or support for sexual assault or other things too, though. We don't just, not just on this side of things, we do transition. Transition is like a massively important part of military service. Like I said before, you spend that 12 weeks to 12 months getting socialised into the military. The military is highly scheduled, routinized, everything's covered for you. And then when you leave, well, at least in Australia, it can be a matter of signing on a dotted line and see you later. Yeah. And, so we do a lot of work around that, particularly around employment, recognition of prior learning, trying to translate those military skills into civilian skills, which is a difficult thing to do. I mean, you're a gunslinger and then you want to go to the city street to pick up some other work. You end up getting channeled into security or mining or whatever. So we're trying to create new pathways that allow people when they leave to ask, what do I want to do now? Not how do I do in Civvy Street what I did in the army or the military.
Yeah. That's really key. I mean, I imagine you guys have the same problems we do with war and the military. We have a lot of military suicides. I think at least one veteran a day kills himself. There's a lot they deal with joblessness, homelessness, which is really extraordinary to me because the leadership that we teach in the American military is an extraordinary version of leadership and autonomy when it comes to if chain of command collapses, they can still go on their missions and do stuff. You see the difference between the military in Russia compared to the military for like us. And, these folks were handling multi-billion-dollar machines, right?
Yeah.
They're entrusted with multi-billion-dollar machines. They're entrusted with leading and organizing, and they can't find a job when they come back. That's just extraordinary to me. With that level of leadership that they're taught, they're great for organizations. And, I mean, the leadership is transposable. If you learn how to be a good leader, how to command a team, how to get shit done, because that's what the military does,
yep.
You should be great. You should be great for running a corporation or being a CEO. So it's a sad fact that this is going on, and suicides are so high, et cetera, in the military and the veterans.
Yeah. Like as I've said a few times, we had the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. We don't have quite the rate or incidence of suicide that you do in the US, and there's a key difference too. It's you have guns, and you don't normally survive a gun attempt.
Self-wound, yeah.
Yeah, but in Australia, I mean, this is one of we're doing a national study on veteran suicide at the moment, and we've done 100 interviews. But we can do that with people who survive because they're not using the same lethal means that they do in some other places.
Wow, isn't that something? Yeah, that's right. You guys don't have guns over there. You guys had that horrific event, I think, in the 90s or the 80s.
Yeah, it might have been 96 Port Arthur massacre. Yeah.
And you guys got wise. You're smarter than us, that's for sure. Anyway, final thoughts as we go out. Pitch people on the book, how they can reach out to you on the social media, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. We titled the book Warrior, Soldier, Brigand, and the reason for that is to ask the question, can we have an ethical militarism? Or can an authoritarian institution liberalise? Can it not be so... I mean, given the nature of its work, obviously hierarchy, command, authority are really important. But
you can't all vote on who's going to take the hill in the military.
That's right. Yeah. We're just posing the question, and not going to very deep into it, we're just posing the question, are you a warrior, a soldier, or a brigand? And what we mean by warrior is not this kind of hyper-masculine tough guy. I mean this idea of probably more like Eastern philosophy, I suppose, mercy, justice, judicious use of violence. Violence is a last resort. But still, when it comes down to having the capacity to resolve something, yeah.
I mean, it's a hard balance to balance the two. Because, the penchant to kill is a very masculine thing. It really is. It's in our nature to kill. We're designed to be killers by nature. We're designed to be protectors and providers. A protector has got to be able to kill. And so it's very easy for us compared to women. But it is a masculine trait. And while I love Eastern philosophy, I wonder if that's really the best way for us to go, because we don't need a bunch of flim-flams in the military. And I'm using flim-flam as emotionalism and feminist sort of thinking. You need masculine people who can kill and who can respect the meritocracy. So, yeah, I don't know. I suppose there's got to be a way to bridge the gap.
Chris, I think all of the Five Eyes have had some issue with war crimes. Yeah. It's not a dissimilar thing, right? We had just went through this. We have the Afghanistan war crimes, and the key figure in that, Ben Robert Smith, was created a defamation case against the news who were reporting, sort of trial by media, and that when you listen to the transcripts of the legal court case for whatever 8 weeks or whatever, there's two sides to it, and one is the rogue brigand, the rape, the pillage, and then there's still these special forces guys that are saying, no, I'm here for principle. I didn't come over here to shoot a farmer in the back. I didn't come over here to rape and pillage. I have a principled approach to my military action, and I think that's what we're trying to do. And militaries recognise that because they're trying to teach some sort of ethics. So I don't think it has to tip into everyone being a social worker. No offence to social workers, but, soldiers are better with guns than social workers.
That's true. Yeah. Plus, most social workers are women. They're not going to shoot anybody. I mean, it's the wonderful thing that women aren't built that way. Thank God they aren't, because if women could kill, they would. You ever had your girlfriend or a woman give you that look where she's like, I wish this guy was dead so I could move on. I know Chris Rock does a bit on that in Bigger, Better, Blacker. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on the show. This is a real important aspect. I deal a lot with veterans, and we talk about this in some of my gaming communities. I roll with a few veterans in the military, and veteran suicide, all these issues are just for people that stand between us and the darkness. There's a lot of shit that goes on in this world most people never hear about, between military special ops and operations. You know, there's lots of people at the FBI that's being disabled right now in January 2025, that they stop terrorist activities before they can trigger. And, you know, I don't think most people realize how much between the military and the Five Eyes, as you mentioned, stands between us and the most evil people on Earth. And they may have some that get through, like 9/11, things like that. There's a lot they stop. And, yeah, we need to respect that.
Yeah, and I hope, given the current circumstances, the US retains institutions that do that.
You're so funny. I don't know. We'll be lucky if we survive anything at this point. It's getting weird. So anyway, thank you very much for coming on board, Ben. We really appreciate you being on the show and sharing the story. And let's all do better at respecting our veterans, everybody out there in the audience. Pick up his book wherever fine books are sold. Warrior Soldier Brigand. Institutional Abuse Within the Australian Defence Force, out July 8th, 2024. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. Great discussion there, Ben.